Hey guys, welcome back to my channel here. It's Lavender here, and today I'm back with another true crime case because it's October and it's almost Halloween. I'm doing people of color true crime cases that don't get enough attention. So let's get started into this true crime case I want to cover today. So today I want to cover the true crime case, the pure evil murder of Lynette Daley, an Indigenous Aboriginal Native Australian woman, the shocking systematic racism case story, murdered missing Indigenous women. So let's get started into this video. So I decided to cover this case because this is one of the craziest cases that I've come across on the internet. I decided to cover this case because this is one of the craziest, most insane systematic racism cases I've ever seen. They literally had evidence that she did not consent to, this sexual act, and then acted like there was no, foul play or true crime involved. So let's get started into this true crime story. So here we go. So Lynette had fallen on hard times before she was murdered, sleeping rough, having lost custody of her children, and a battling alcohol addiction. She was addicted to alcohol. Her parents said she loved school and loved sports, but she was a rebellious teenager at age 15. She ended up dropping out of high school and fell in with the wrong crowd. Lynette and her twin brother were born in the riverside town of McLean, the middle of 5 children. Their mother, Telma, eventually split with their father and married Gordon. Lynette, a cheeky tomboy who preferred the nickname Norma, and she loved animals, particularly eagles for the freedom they excluded. She adopted the eagle as her totem or spiritual emblem. One day, while packing lemons, 2 dogs attacked her, her mother had said, tearing into her leg and prompting an emergency trip to the hospital. Undaunted, she returned to the lemon tree the very next day, and by age 16, she was pregnant with her first child. Several of her children were fathered by men in her family who said had been in an abusive relationship with her, and she was abused on the daily. She would be seen covered in bruises, according to her family. There is no shortage of distressing data. Indigenous women and girls are about 35 times more likely to be hospitalized due to family abuse, violence than their counterparts. Indigenous women are 2 to 4 times likely to be sexually assaulted. Indigenous mothers are nearly 18 times more likely to be victims of homicide. Those are just some statistics on murdered missing Indigenous women. The courts did intervene when it came to her children with her alcohol addiction, awarding custody to her parents after it became clear she could not care for them. She loved her children and visited them very often, her parents had said, but knew they were safer with their grandparents. She knew they were safe with their grandparents. By age 33, Lynette was homeless, and on January day in 2011, she showed up at Gordon and Thelma's house sick from the alcohol she'd been drinking because she had an alcohol addiction. Sick of it all, she spent a couple of days there detoxing, drying out. Her stepfather thought that she'd finally hit rock bottom. On Australian Day, long holiday weekend of the year in 2011, she went on a camping trip with her boyfriend Adrian Attenwater and Paul Maris on a New South Wales beach. Lynette Daley later laid dead by the time the cops rolled up to the beach where her naked body lay. Her skin was cold, her lips were blue, and her blood was everywhere. Rigor mortis had started to kick in. It was between her legs, there was evidence of a cover-up murder in the area. It was inside the 4-wheel drive parked nearby, and on the remains of a recently burned mattress partially hidden in the sand, and it was on the jeans worn by one of the 2 men, which were Lynette when she had died. A coroner would later find that Lynette bled out to death on the beach after a violent sex rape act. She was raped. She was subjected to while being so deeply intoxicated she could not have consented to this at all. A forensic pathologist dubbed her injuries more severe than those of women who go through during childbirth. They have all been drinking when they parked in the dunes and the beach earlier. Lynette was particularly blackout drunk. An autopsy later showed her blood alcohol level had been between 0.30 and 0.35%, high enough to leave her severely incapacitated. Her boyfriend told the police he and Lynette began to engage in what he described as a consensual sex act. However, this obviously wasn't consensual because you cannot be like blackout drunk, passing out, like unconscious, and be that's not consensual. It was a straight up rape, but he said it was consensual, in which he engaged in a fisting act, and that later led to her death from internal injuries in her vagina. The men told the police they had stopped when they saw blood. He didn't think that she was in pain because she didn't complain about pain and thought that the blood might be her menstruation period blood. Maris set fire to the blood-soaked mattress from the back of the truck along with Lynette's blood-stained bra. At 6 a.m., Maris called paramedics and said they had all been drinking and that Lynette had stopped breathing. It took the ambulance about over an hour to reach the remote beach site, and by then when we got there, she was already dead. When questioned, Maris said he had burned the mattress because it smelled bad, and that Lynette's bra because he didn't think she would want it. Despite the urgings of the coroner and police to prosecute this case as a homicide, prosecutors refused to try the man charged with her murder. Only amid enormous pressure from the public outrage that ensued that they last agreed to bringing the case to court. Lynette's parents believe the reason it took so long to try this case in the first place is basically because she's an Aboriginal native Australian woman who has an alcohol addiction, and we've seen in the past true crime episodes that I've done how Australian police and how, society treats people of color, Aboriginal Australians who have drug addictions. Her father was quoted saying their daughter was Aboriginal, the two men accused in her death were white, aka systematic racism. He was later quoted saying, if it was two Indigenous men who have done this to a white girl, they would have been prosecuted immediately and they'd be in prison. A few months later, police charged Akinwater with manslaughter and Maris with an accessory after the fact. Her parents were relieved. They thought that they were going to get justice out of this. However, months passed with no word on whether the men would be prosecuted. What the prosecutors said next left them stunned. They were dropping all charges against them. The prosecutors made this excuse saying they couldn't prove the men intended to hurt Leanne. The explanation was baffling. A charge of manslaughter does not require proof of intent. And later headlines blaring "vile" and "no justice for tragic Norma" followed a reference to Lynette's nickname. A hashtag Justice for Norma campaign launched on a social media sites. An online petition demanding the head prosecutor justify his actions gathered tens of thousands of signatures. Protests rallied outside the offices of a local politician and all over the area, and a Facebook comment liked more than 1,000 times. One woman summed up the mood of many: "Today I'm appalled to be Australian." Eventually, later on, they actually were finally tried. It took over 5 years for them to actually be tried with her murder. Convicted of Miss Daley's manslaughter and aggravated sexual assault. Atwater, her boyfriend, was subsequently sentenced to 19 years in prison with a 14-year non-parole period. Maris was sentenced to 9 years in prison with a non-parole period of at least 6 years and 9 months for aggravated sexual assault and hindering a police investigation. From last time I heard, they were trying to appeal their cases. So if you guys like this video, don't forget to comment, like, and share this video. So bye guys, see you next video.